Tell me I'm not crazy and that my character does actually look like a post-white Michael Jackson. I'm looking at this character right now for the first time up close and I'm just like, damn, this totally isn't the waifu material that I wanted to make. Alright guys, so I know it's been a while coming and I do apologize I've taken so long, but we're finally going to revamp our Rushdown Mage build, 2.0 as I like to call it. And just as a quick side note, no disrespect to the late great MJ, I personally think he's one of the best musicians of all time. I absolutely love Michael Jackson, but I can't deny the fact that up close, man, this character kind of reminded me a little bit of Michael Jackson. It's kind of scary. But anyways, let's get into the actual build. For those of you that don't know, this was first created a while ago. I won't link it in the description, but if you're coming from the previous video, because I linked it in the previous video to this new video, I'm just going to quickly outline the changes, and we're going to get onto the actual weapons that we're going to use, or that we're going to focus on, and the crux of the build, as we call it, what makes it so effective. So starting off, again, Soul Level 120, that's the Soul Level 120 series we like to do, keeping everything at the PvP level, so to speak. Our health, we actually compromised a lot. We normally would go with 39, and we brought it down to 30. Now, we don't use the life ring because it's not really all that beneficial for this build. Instead, we have just the 41 health in Ember form. Our attunement, surprisingly enough, only at 14. That gives us 2 attunement slots, which we use Crystal Magic Weapon and Great Soul Arrow for. The only thing Great Soul Arrow is there to do is to bait opponents. If we end up getting a random hit, great, but otherwise we're just trying to force enemies to come in towards us thinking they can punish us or something. You know, you're throwing out Great Soul Arrow at mid-range, people think they can come in and punish you, then, you know, if you're using a fast weapon, you can usually recover fast enough in order to beat them down before they can initiate their attack. And we'll look into that once we get to the PvP. The endurance, again, deviating a little bit away from my general philosophy of maxing out endurance at 40. We're going with 35. Our vitality, just at the default of 10. This is what you start off with as, I believe, who did we start off as? A mercenary. So if you were to start off, not necessarily as a knight, but maybe something else with less vitality and less faith and luck, because we do waste a few points there. Probably, actually, a knight probably would have been better, but nonetheless, this isn't too bad. We don't lose too many extra points in other areas. Our strength, surprisingly enough, only at 13. That allows us to two-hand the Zweihander if we need it, and it allows us to use some of the heavier weapons like the Moonlight Greatsword, Greatsword of Judgment, even though it's kind of bad, the Astora Greatsword, and etc. We can use those two-handed, which is the only way I'd really ever want to use them, to be honest. Great Swords and Ultra Great Swords. Dexterity, we pumped up to 35, mainly because we're going to go with the Sharp Infusion, since most of the weapons we're going to be using are the smaller, more dexterity-based weapons, things like the Katana, the Sellsword, Twin Blades, Goddard Sword, S-Stock, etc. Better off with Sharp than with Heavy or Refined, because we're not going to split dexterity and strength evenly at 20-20. We just don't gain optimal scaling from that. You're better off just putting dexterity up to 35 and then using the Hunter's Ring to go up to 40. Our intelligence is at 55, and the reason for that, it's been changed a lot, but when you use the Court Sorcerer Staff at 60 intelligence, because what we do, our normal ring setup, we'll have the Ring of Favor and the Stamina Ring. This ring slot here usually will be occupied by something like the Farron Ring or something, or even the Hornet Ring. But we're going to want to swap out a ring because we're not really using the life ring. So we start off with the Scholar's Ring to pump our intelligence up to 60. And what that does is, if you look at the Court Sorcerer Staff plus 10, our spell buff is 238. If we take off the Scholar Ring, our spell buff drops by 18 down to 220. So without actually investing the extra points, we still get the maximum amount of scaling, and that's going to be beneficial for a few reasons, which I'm going to discuss in a little bit. This ring slot, I mean, you can use whatever you want. Sun Princess Ring, Havel Ring if you want to wear heavier armor, Farron Ring if you want to use a lot of weapon arts, which in this build you do, so I personally go with the Farron Ring, and I'll explain why if you actually watch the PvP matches, which I did link at the beginning of the video, and I will link it again at the end and in the description. But this is essentially the ring setup. The armor setup, totally up to you based on what weapon you want to use. You can probably actually go for something a little bit more weighty. I ended up going with this setup just because it looks decent, I think. And weapon-wise, this is where things kind of get interesting. So with this build, since we don't have a lot of strength, but we've got a lot of dexterity. Oh, we're being summoned in the middle of a video? Alright, well let's see what we can do here. If we do get summoned, or if we don't get an error. I think we're going to get an error anyways, that sucks. Anyways, back to the video. So with the weapons that you're going to use, because they are lightweight, you can most likely equip two things. The Crescent Moon Sword only weighs 2.5. It's actually a good offhand weapon to use. It's just as fast as the Karthus Curved Sword, so it's a good weapon to kind of switch to and rush enemies down with, or get behind a shield. Throughout the weapon art, which is a magic, like shooting beam. Not a beam, but like a projectile. I don't know why I called it a beam, but it's this thing. You got to charge it with L2. Sorry, I don't know if I said R2. But it's good to bait opponents with again as well. But since we got Great Soul Arrow, probably wouldn't use the weapon art all too much. You do have access to things like the Karthus Curved Sword if you want to use it. And I actually need to go farm for an extra sharp stone because I want to actually make this sharp, but I don't have one. So don't use it as refined on this build. Make it sharp. But you only want to use the Karthus Curved Sword two-handed anyways. It's way too slow one-handed, but it's extremely fast and extremely good when two-handed. I'm sure everybody knows that already though. The Sharp Sellsword Twin Blades, very, very good. You can see there it does 340 damage when we're two-handing it. But the real focus of the build is, of course, Crystal Magic Weapon. So from 340, we go up to 567, which is pretty much an Ultra Greatsword level damage. If we switch over the Scholar Ring over to the Hunter's Ring, you can see there we gain an extra 13 points of damage for just 20 points off of 600 base attack. And what makes this so deadly, and you're going to see it in the PvP matches that I link, so make sure you check out those matches because we do some insane stuff. And you can play Rushdown with this weapon even though you're supposed to play a little bit more conservative, but when you do the combo damage with the weapon art, the L2, R2, you can deal somewhere between 800 to 1200, even one-shot somebody. Especially if you start off with the like L1 starter or the R1 starter into the weapon art combo, it's absolutely insane. Again, coupled with the Farron Ring makes it so that you have ample amount of swings to use with the weapon art, and I don't believe that they're parryable. I think in the latest patch they may be unparryable. People have tried to parry me with this weapon quite a few times, with the weapon art that is, and they failed every time. So just do keep that in mind. It is a good thing to use to just basically run up to an enemy, especially if they're trying to parry you, and don't do an R1, don't do an L1. Just do an L2, R2, and you're going to do a ton of damage to somebody if they're trying to parry you. Same goes for the Goddard Twin Swords. Absolutely insane amounts of damage with the weapon art. Being a straight sword, it is really, really good on its own, but just coupled with that weapon art that you can really abuse and do a ton of damage with, just makes it that much better. So with the Goddard Twin Swords, we do 339, just a little bit less damage than the Sellsword Twin Blades, the Sharp Sellsword Twin Blades, because when we switch over this, we're going to go down a little bit. But when you buff it, it's going to do an insane amount of damage, either way. One of the things I wanted to talk about was using the Prisoner's Chain and the Magic Clutch Rings. While it would make sense to use those for ample amounts of damage and extra stats, because I was using it actually to bump my health up to when I had 35 health, I was using it to bump it up to 40, and I was using it to bump my endurance up to 40 as well, and get an extra bit of vitality. However, with testing, it does seem that the Prisoner's Chain, you actually take more than 10% damage, like it says, on top of the enemy's attack. It's like something like 15%. Same with the Magic Clutch Rings. They don't give you the full benefit of the 15% boost on your attack. It actually only gives you half of that at 7.5, and I think you end up taking more damage from it as well. So it's not worth using for those of you that think that, why am I not using those to complement the lower stats in health and endurance? That's the reason why. It's just not worth it. Since we are using smaller weapons as well with this build for the most part, I mean, we do have access to the Zweihander and the Refined Historic Greatsword if we need to. You're going to be more agile. So we're not going to focus on trades. We don't need a lot of health because the whole point is to avoid getting hit and comboing our opponent. Is it cheap? Yes. Is it effective? Yes. So it is what it is, guys. The whole point of my builds is to show you guys what is most effective. So if you're going to play with a build like this, you do have to play more reactive, not focus on trades or focus on baiting opponents out too much. You're going to have to kind of go in for pokes here and there, be agile. You will still have to bait opponents to some degree, but don't go for things that are unsafe. Don't attempt to trade. Try to punish, try to read opponents, and play more reactive with this kind of build. It's opposite to my normal quality build where I play super aggressive. This one you're going to play more moderately, and you're going to see that in the PvP fight. So with that said, I think I've covered mostly everything that I wanted to note. And just in case you guys didn't catch the damage buff, so we go from 327 to 553, which is over 200 points of magic damage being applied to this weapon. And like I said, the combo damage is in the Lothric Greatsword 2-hit R1 combo range. You're going to deal somewhere between 900 to probably 1200 points of damage simply by doing a combo like that to somebody. So it's really overpowered, and I do know, I know I mentioned in another video that I don't really watch other builds and other videos, but I do know that other people have mentioned this kind of build to me where you scale up your intelligence to the max to gain the most amount of spell buff. Same thing goes for intelligence. If you want to maximize the scaling and build a class around an aggro mage or an aggressive mage, you do kind of have to do that if you want to utilize the weapon buff. But this is my iteration of it. I don't know how the other people build theirs, but I sacrificed health and a little bit of endurance, sacrificed the strength, and a little bit of dexterity because I end up using the Hunter's Ring. And I think that this build works really well for me. And if you want to see the actual matches where we absolutely tear shit up, check the description, click the link in there, or click the link that's going to pop up at the end of this video. But let me know what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Quantum is out.